All right.
Yeah.
Welcome, everyone. Hey, Jeremy. Good to see you. Let us know in the chat if you can hear and see us okay. Got lots of people, more people coming in. That's fantastic. Let us know where you're watching from, uh, and we'll get kicked off. I'm pretty excited about this because good to hear, Francis. Thank you. Um, Yeah, this is every investor I talk to at the moment, and every investor meeting I've had, this kind of comes up at some point in the conversation. I know you've also been looking at it as well. What are your high level thoughts on it so far, Jeremy?
My God, where to start?
Well,
Uh,
I've got some talking points. Shall I?
yeah, I mean, if I mean, there's just so many things. Yeah, so valuation. Let's start with valuation because this is quite astonishing. I mean, look, I think one of the key things here is that the private markets are done. All the VC funds, everybody, they're just this AI boom that's been going on has just sucked all the liquidity out of the private market sort of capital place. So I think part of this listing is to get access to more capital. They need $75 billion dollars, mainly because XAI is burning $1 billion a month on being number 16th in the world, and it's really really challenging for them to access that kind of capital in any other way. As you say here, valuation of 1.75 trillion. Bear in mind that I remember seeing that the 1.5 trillion valuation that was posited, a few months back, that meant that if you stuck 50 grand, I think it was, into the seed round, you're worth 150 million. And now obviously that valuation has gone up by another chunk.
It was 800 billion in December. So
Yeah,
what's that, like six months ago?
yeah. So
So
it doubled in six
more than
months.
doubled.
And I mean, the company will do 15 billion in revenue this year. So if you think about it, when Facebook went public, it was at 11 times revenue, and everybody moaned like crazy that it was overvalued. This is like 100 times, 100 times revenue, and it's a physical product. It's not a digital. I mean, obviously the AI component is, but it's their forecast growth this year, I think, is 20% or 25%. So I think when Google went public, Google was 10 times revenue. It kind of settled at around about 6 or 7 times revenue, but it was growing at 25% a quarter.
Mm.
Um, and so, yeah, I think it's really, really hard to get evaluation. Now,
But it's clearly not a bet on what happened last year. It's the exponential growth, isn't it? It's
yeah,
the and
and
that's exponential in the space side of it as well as exponential in the XAI side of it as well, which
yeah.
if they can win the market share game, which is a big if, but AI companies have shown that they can generate huge amounts of revenue. So I mean, Anthropic has done a killer job of doing that.
I think that's one of the reasons why they're going public so early is because if Anthropic and OpenAI go public first, there's going to be no liquidity in the public markets either. So they've dried up in private markets, and now I think they've got to get public quicker. And of course, XAI, Anthropic, OpenAI would really struggle as startups to go public, but by sticking XAI into SpaceX, which is a more established vehicle, it makes the go public solution much easier. Having said that, I'm not sure if you're an original SpaceX investor. Of course, most of them have really drunk the Elon kind of Kool-Aid. But I'm not sure you'd be super happy about being the rescue liquidity for something that's burning $1 billion a day. And like I say, is number 16th in the world for adoption
Yeah,
after some pretty stiff
I mean
competitors.
that's a fairly Musk playbook though, isn't it? Like he
Well,
will
yeah.
not fold in companies that aren't doing so well.
Yeah, so I mean, actually, it's an exact playbook of Solar City into Tesla.
Relativity is Tesla.
Yeah,
Exactly.
so Solar City was bleeding, bleeding, bleeding. He made Tesla acquire them. Obviously, really easy to do acquisitions when you're the buyer and the seller. Rolling Solar City into Tesla probably wasn't great for Tesla shareholders, but was great for Solar City shareholders. And actually, there's another thing that's really similar with the SpaceX and the Tesla one is that basically Tesla had squeezed liquidity, which drove the price incredibly high for a long period of time, and then it joined the S&P 500. And ever since it's joined the S&P 500, it's underperformed. And basically, the S&P 500 index funds provided the exit liquidity for all the people in Tesla. And so what's interesting with SpaceX is that he got straight on the phone to NASDAQ. Well, first of all, it's listing on NASDAQ, and he told NASDAQ he will not list unless he gets early inclusion in the NASDAQ 100, which has been agreed. And he's now lobbying to get early inclusion into the S&P 500. And it looks like the rumor is, I don't think it's been announced, but the rumor is that it will be included in the S&P 500 within 2 weeks of listing. And this is really, really interesting because I was trying to do the maths on what it
So,
would.
so the reason I sent you those talking points ahead of time so that we
Ah,
would
yeah,
go
yeah,
through
because that's
logically,
later on,
not
yeah.
just
But it, but it's
bouncing.
but it's interesting. It's the same formula that that he did with Tesla, and yeah, it's kind of coming over again. But yeah, valuation. Let's stick with
Yeah, I
valuation
mean,
for a
I
minute.
think that we've got a slide on that whole secondaries piece because that ties into a lot of what we do with the constrained stock model and the supply and demand.
And,
It's
and by the way, there's a really interesting point here. It mentions the Starlink projected revenue. Starlink has grown in revenue, but its margin is collapsing while it grows. So the more and that's its EBITDA margin is going down as it grows. So the percentage that it makes is going down. The other thing is that in the prospect, or not in the prospectus, but in the published information. They have the addressable market for Starlink as 1.2 billion people, which is roughly the number of internet users on the planet. I'm not sure that Starlink has an addressable market of everyone. I would get a bit hesitant about that as well. But I mean the data centers in space, I guess, is the other value driver. That if you've got an AI company and your constraint is power and cooling, and you've got unlimited power and cooling in space, there's a lot of glass half empty stuff about that on the internet, which I don't know the truth of or not. But by one measure, a $15 billion ground-based data center would cost $60 billion to produce in space, would require rocket launches every hour for a year, and a 4 kilometer structure hovering above us in space. So yeah, it's
Yeah, it's
interesting.
interesting. So there's actually, I can't remember the name of it. There's a company that has just raised at I think a 4 billion valuation, which is doing data centers at sea, which
Ah, yeah.
is considerably cheaper and more practical than getting them
Mm.
in space. But the space does seem to be very popular. And what's interesting is 2 years ago, nobody was talking about it. And then Elon Musk mentioned it, and suddenly it's become everyone's talking about it. So Jan is mentioning in the chat that they got in at 120 billion valuation 2 years ago, which is
Yeah.
that's staggering growth.
Yeah.
Michael is saying, is this the only IPO you have, Callum? Unfortunately, this isn't one of our IPOs. I wish it was. But at the end, I'll share a little bit more about some of the IPOs that we do and some opportunities around that. But yeah. All right, let's crack on to the next one. So this is really sort of what I think is interesting. And you kind of touched on it, but because this is so, Jan mentioning that he got in 2 years ago at 120 billion valuation, it's been the most heavily traded secondaries stock. And I think anyone that wanted to get in, any institutional investor that wanted to get in, has had a means to get in.
Yeah.
But you're right. So basically, the concern is when you've got people that have come in that have significantly 10x or more or significantly more their numbers, there's a good chance that they're going to take money off the table on day one. And unless you do set something up to create the buy side, there's probably not enough retail investors to soak it all up. So doing that deal with Nasdaq was absolutely critical to get all the ETFs to own them. And apparently, a lot of the ETFs have actually been trying to get into the latest round because they know they're going to have to buy the next round, so they might as well get that win. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I saw the numbers recently on the employees, just in Austin, Texas alone, the amount of millionaires that this IPO is going to create. And always that, yeah, to be fair to Silicon Valley, whenever they do have a big liquidity event like this, it does do massive things for the industry, and everyone becomes an angel investor, and it does kind of feed the ecosystem. So that's quite positive. And I thought this point about simplification, they've done 31 capital raising rounds. And so, especially in the early days of capital raising, investors are in a position to ask for preferential terms and all sorts of things. Cap tables, I mean, you and I know that cap tables can get very messy with just one round. But 31 rounds can be quite a lot. But so just from a simplification point of view, it should be really, really beneficial.
Yeah,
And
my understanding from a little bit of research was that they're raising 75 billion through the actual IPO itself, which will be a tiny free float, 5% free float. All of these early stage investors are locked up for 6 months. And he's trying to get the S&P 500 inclusion in 2 weeks. So basically, the investment bankers and their friends are going to hold the 75 billion. They're going to drive that valuation up as high as they can when it lists, and all of them are going to exit to the Vanguards and pension funds and all of these guys. And then everybody else is going to be allowed to come into the market and play. Once all the investment banks, everyone who has a surname, Goldman or Sachs, is going to be sorted, and then everybody else is going to be allowed to play a little bit later on, which is insane. But it does really squeeze the initial availability of shares, and it's widely predicted that it's going to be highly volatile. But just looking at it, it might be volatile on the upside at the beginning because there is this sophisticated book of holders and a big squeeze.
yeah, and look, I mean, one of the things, we talk about this supply and demand issue all of the time in small cap listings, but the one thing that these guys have over everyone else is that they are able to genuinely create demand and noise and attention like no other company on the
Mm,
planet. And to your point about sort of there's maybe two or three new listings that can come out before all liquidity from the public markets is drained. But OpenAI came out this week and said, maybe we're not ready to go public, which
mm,
is kind of they've just closed their funding round, the biggest funding round in history. And then the CFO came out and said, "Oh, I don't think we're ready to go public yet," which I imagine the investors aren't too thrilled with. But
right.
uh, yeah,
Yeah,
it's an interesting one because if you aren't in that, if you don't go public this year, it's going to be interesting to see whether there's still that much money knocking around after that.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, like you said, though, this is going to be a massive capital event. It's going to be a democratization event for a lot of wealth because there are so many employees, so many holders, so many secondary market holders, so many funds. I mean, I think it bails out ARK Invest. I think, there's a whole bunch of VCs and funds where this is now 99% of their holding because it's grown so much and everything else has been pretty poor. So, for them, it's massive liquidity, which either gets returned to, LPs or gets reinvested into other startups and things. And so I think that's going to be really, really exciting. I mean, there's a really good kind of bunch of things around the timing of this, because one of them is obviously that first mover one I mentioned, which is if you don't go now, it's going to be very hard to go
Yeah.
later. The other one is it's Elon's 55th birthday.
Yeah.
So maybe he just had be a trillionaire by 55 on his on his wish list or his I want to say vision board, yeah. So
So and he's actually trying to get the listing on his actual date of birth, isn't he?
well, he's
Which kind
trying to
of
do it on he's
doesn't
trying to
do
do it
much.
on he's trying to do it on June 9, which is 69. 69.
Yeah.
So
But
if he was 50 years younger, it would be 67, obviously, but it's
yeah,
it's 69. It's a very Elon number to list on, isn't
it does nothing to dissuade those people that claim this is all cult of Musk.
it? Yeah, well, and then there's another one which is that Venus, Mercury, and Mars are in alignment, and it's once in a every so often thing. But I think
Yeah.
yeah, that's astrology, not astronomy, isn't it? So,
So let's since we're on the subject of Musk, and by the way, those watching, if you have any questions or have any comments, please chuck them into the chat. Let me know, Jan, are you planning on buying more? Are you planning on selling? Fun fact from Michael, 67 mistaken Cantonese. Good to know.
amazing.
Um, so look, on the topic of Musk, uh, nobody has yeah, you'd be a very brave person to bet against him. He has
Yeah.
just an absolutely astonishing track record. It's yeah, just staggering what he's done. I remember writing a blog post about when he first proposed his Tesla compensation, which was like a long time ago. And it was just such a brave and astronomical. Like you could see him reaching the first two or three, but it was a 10-point plan, and the chances of him reaching all 10 were just, yeah, it just didn't seem it was even on the radar. And yeah, of course he did manage it. And now he's gone with the same approach with SpaceX. So basically, he needs to increase the valuation to 7.5 trillion, and he needs to build a self-sustaining Mars colony of 1 million people. And if he doesn't build that, he doesn't get any pay. Now, as an investor, I would love to see more CEOs willing to make these kind of bets. I think it's, you're very aligned as an investor in a company. But yeah, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, my dad always said to me, if you meet a guy in a bar and he tells you he can make the Jack of Hearts jump out of a pack of cards and pee in your ear, don't take the bet. It's, they
Wise
only,
man and father.
yeah, people only make bets they know they can win. So, but yeah, it's a really, really clever strategy. And the 7.5 trillion valuation, you can see that. Uh, the colony bit is much, much harder. So no colony, no pay, then I think yeah, you'd take that bet
Yeah,
because I mean ultimately the 7.5 trillion valuation is your reward, isn't it, as an investor?
yeah, for sure. I mean, even the fact that we're having these conversations, like how long ago was it that we had our first $1 trillion company? It wasn't,
Yeah, I
it's
know, not that long ago. Yeah,
5
just
years
after
ago or
COVID. Yeah,
something.
just
Yeah,
after COVID. Yeah, and Apple, then Amazon, then Aramco, then yeah, it's now trillion is the new billion. Yeah, it's
it's astonishing. And then you've got this, I mean, not unusual, but he is, yeah, and most of his strategies are much more about control and power rather than uh, capital. Well, yeah, he uses capital for growth rather than uh, what the left seems to assume that he's just piling it all up in a swimming pool somewhere. But then the other one is this orbital data centers, which, like I said, like 2 years ago, this was on nobody's radar. And he started talking about it, and now, I mean, you've probably got 100 startups out there that are
mm,
all playing in this space now. Everyone's talking about it.
Well,
Um,
they did actually launch an NVIDIA GPU into space and operate it, and it kept switching off from overheating.
right.
Um, so there is still the problem is all the chips rely on an exchange of air with heat, and there is no air. So you actually have to create like a cooling array, which is a fairly large physical object that needs to be attached to the data center. So yeah, there's some interesting technical barriers that need to be overcome.
Yeah. But again, he's looking at so in this, he's tied it to 100 terawatts of space-based AI computing, which is
Yeah.
3,300 times more than the total usage this year, estimated usage this year across all companies. Um, yeah, you can't accuse him of thinking small, can you?
No, no, I must go and have a word with myself in the mirror later. So-
Stick another zero on anything else that you're
or,
thinking.
or
Uh,
nine zeros, yeah. So-
yeah,
what's a
exactly.
terawatt again?
Yeah, it's a lot of watts.
Yeah.
So Jess is saying, how would the SpaceX IPO cause the Tesla stock price to move? What is the relationship between both SpaceX and Tesla? So yeah, there's kind of been this conversation about, is this the first step towards, or a step towards him ultimately bringing everything under one holdco? I mean, that to me doesn't make a lot of sense unless one of these companies gets in trouble. So if you stick to his playbook of only folding companies in when they're not thriving on their own, Tesla would need to be struggling. I mean, they are doing joint ventures, so around the Giga
Chip
Center or
chip
whatever.
manufacturing has just
Yeah,
been announced. Yeah.
yeah.
Which is a
Um,
joint venture. I mean, the conflicts of interest are insane across the two. So if you're a Tesla shareholder, you're financing XAI, and if you're a SpaceX, investor, you're exposed to Tesla. So there are, there do seem to be endless conflicts in there. Obviously deliberate
yeah,
one. And Optimus is quite critical, I think, to the Mars project and things like that. So
definitely. I think look, the conflicts of interest in the whole tech sector right now, like the spiral web of people promising purchasing to chips and servers and data centers and everything else, and I'll buy your stock if you buy this much compute power from me. So I mean, I could see that it would be easy if you think about Google or Amazon, like they've all got insane multi-billion dollar businesses that are completely independent, and running underneath. So you could see how he could do that, and it might be easier for him in some regards. But I don't think there's any need to do it while uh, Tesla's still getting great valuations for
mm.
basically what it is. And yeah, if his bets are on the robots rather than the cars in Tesla.
Yeah, I mean, Tesla price, I think, is the robots and the self-driving. So, I mean, they're on the self-driving side of things, they do have a much better business model than Waymo because they're vertically integrated with the manufacturing of the cars, whereas Waymo has to rely on, Toyotas and things like this. So, that kind of stacks up. But if you looked at it just through the lens of being a car manufacturer, it makes zero sense.
Yeah.
In much the same way as this. I mean, this is assuming this is kind of this 1.75 trillion basically prices in like a monopoly on internet service provision, an incredibly successful, launching, and they do still have rockets blowing up every so often. They haven't actually done they've landed the rocket, which is incredible. I mean, that was just the most amazing feat of engineering ever, but they haven't got that big one to actually do anything special yet, like an orbit of the planet or something like that. So they're still pretty early stage in their rocket development, even though they've made incredible strides. So they're kind of pricing in perfection, I guess. But then, with the compensation package, he's putting his money where his mouth is. But then you could argue that he already kind of has everything, so this would just be like the cherry on the icing on the cake. It's not, yeah,
Yeah, but I
he's
mean,
a massive equity holder already.
yeah, I genuinely don't. don't think he has particular interest in money for the sake of money. Like it's always about trying to help get interplanetary. That's always been his sort of
But is this
goal.
do you think this is a forward-looking statement in disguise? So basically, he's already a shareholder, so he's already going to make a ton of money.
Yeah.
And then basically, people are going, well, this business can't ever be that big. So he then gives some targets that he has to hit, and then people actually believe that's the
See,
aim.
like, I think the SEC has just given up with anything that like I mean you just look at the deals that he's announced. Like so he's just done that deal with Anthropic. Like this is all stuff that you should not be announcing like weeks
On
before
X.
you go public. I mean, this is go quiet period, and the rest of the world actually sort of pays attention to those kind of rules. I like it. It's just I don't know. He's got so much momentum, and I guess
Here's,
political power that he can
yeah,
get away with a lot of this stuff.
yeah. I mean, here's an interesting one. If you look at what drove the Tesla price in the early days, there were two big drivers. So one of them was people would buy the car, go, this is the future of cars, and go and buy the shares. So, and it, the cars suited a affluent middle class, group of people who could afford to buy a decent amount of the shares as well. And that had a huge, groundswell retail holder, hold them till you die type investor base. And then you had the charm of this eccentric inventor who was doing these, amazing things, clearly an incredibly smart person that was genuinely changing the way everything on our planet works and who had an amazing vision. And we haven't seen anything like that for not in our generation, I don't think. So, in previous generations, you've had Edison, you've had, Tesla, arguably. But, we haven't seen that really for a long time. And I think that was incredibly captivating. Do you think his little foray into politics and potentially the alienation of 50% of the population is going to impact SpaceX, or do you think people will always just put the money before politics?
Yeah, so look, it really did harm him and harmed Tesla, and it's not 50% of the population because he really lost a lot of the global market, and you could argue that many of the people that did like him weren't exactly Tesla buyers to start with. So, yeah, it definitely didn't help him, and it's kind of interesting. There's been a few things on X recently about like 10 years ago, his brand was about solar and it was about, he was very much the good guy. And he really did the arc into the other side for a while. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of I think SpaceX has always sort of sat separately. Like he's so tied to Tesla. And while he is tied to SpaceX, it doesn't seem to have been as tied to his brand in the way that Tesla was. Or maybe it's just because it's not a retail proposition, whereas Tesla was a retail proposition. You could vote with your feet, whereas your average punter isn't going to be buying a satellite anytime soon or a space launch.
But they could be a Starlink customer or an
It could be
XAI
a
customer or
Starlink customer,
Grok.
but
I
I
mean,
think that most of the Starlink customers don't care. It solves
there
the
was the
problem.
interesting one. I mean, SpaceX bought XAI for 250 billion, and then Elon put out a tweet saying, "Actually, everything XAI was shit. We're starting again." Um, which must be great if you're a SpaceX investor to know that you paid 250
So,
billion for
so
something.
Jan's comment on that as a SpaceX investor is we'll be holding the shares post IPO. We have a lockup period. Not too happy about the XAI infusion. He'll need another trillion for the data center in space.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
It's kind of a loyalty play, isn't it? You go along with it because you believe the big vision, and yeah, it's I mean, I think the whole Nazi thing damaged him because now when you search image of Google, image of Elon Musk, probably one of the first ones is him doing that salute from stage after Trump one, and that can't be helpful. I mean, I don't know how many Nazis have TD Ameritrade accounts who can buy the shares on listing day, but it really hasn't helped. Really hasn't helped that brand. I mean, he is obviously a visionary. He obviously is incredibly talented, but that was a massive act of self-sabotage, wasn't it?
It was, but again, if you're an investor and just kind of looking at this compensation plan, like you just wouldn't bet against him, would you? Like you,
No,
I
true.
mean, that stuff's really irritating, and I'm sure it was very, very irritating for investors and for the board and for the staff and partners and customers and everything else. But ultimately, he he just makes stuff happen in a way that we really haven't seen anyone else. I mean, Steve Jobs was awesome with he had his vortex zone that you could go in trying to convince him of something and come out completely convinced with the opposite answer. But
Yeah.
I think Musk's vortex zone is far, far bigger. It's just he seems to shape stuff to his own wanting.
Mm.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. So you kind of touched on this at the beginning, and I cut you off. So,
Yeah.
um, but I think this is really, really interesting. So far this year, I think it's kind of interesting for the rest of the market. So far this year, 73% of all venture capital has gone into four companies, and they're four decent sized companies. They're not small companies. And so yeah, OpenAI has raised a record 122 billion, and then came out and said, yeah, maybe we don't need to go public anymore. Um, Anthropic is clearly killing it. Went after the business model as opposed to the consumer model, which OpenAI is now trying to catch up on. Um, but yeah, so what's your take on that? And
Yeah, and I mean, look, the other 26% has probably gone into, smaller startup competitor
copycats.
versions of exactly the same thing. I mean, I remember doing the maths at the end of last year that basically we were already in a global recession if you took out AI. So I think the global economy grew by, 5.5% or something, and AI investment was 6% or 6.5%. And that was when you include the data centers, the energy, and all of the AI companies. So basically, we are in a recession if it wasn't for all of this money that's being pumped into stuff. And also, I mean, XAI is not doing that well in the AI space. They are lagging. You have Grok, but Grok is basically in X, and X is hemorrhaging users and revenue and everything else. So it's the fact that X needed a bailout and XAI really needed a bailout because XAI is, like I say, $1 billion a month of losses at the moment. That's why it was all shoved into SpaceX to basically, stop it, stop the problem. And I guess also, when you look at the market leaders, like OpenAI and Anthropic, they're always going to be, favorites when it comes to the next rounds. So XAI had to join something like this, I guess, in order to be fundable going forwards. And that idea of let's stick a data center in space captures people's imaginations. I mean, actually, I remember years ago there was a guy that wanted to put solar panels in space, and he was
Nice and
able to get
small.
yeah, and he was able to get meetings with everyone, the PIF, the Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund, everyone, because it was such a crazy idea. He would have meetings, and then eventually people would just invest in regular solar farms, and so he would then do the regular solar farms. So his foot in the door was to say, we're going to put a solar farm in space, and the actual pitch was, but for now, let's do one on Earth, which
Mm.
if he just led with that, he wouldn't have had the meetings. So it's an
Well,
interesting
that's
idea.
kind of been Musk's approach with let's go to Mars. We'll start with the
Yeah,
moon. We'll
yeah.
start with satellites. That's
Yeah.
but
But
yeah,
I mean, interestingly, I mean, the SpaceX part of the business, which I mean, actually, this none of the valuation is predicated on SpaceX really. It's really driven on XAI and Starlink are being the two major
yeah.
drivers
Although
for this.
I don't think you can write off SpaceX because it's what it has achieved is
Mm,
staggering. And I think what's what's happened is it's created a whole industry that wasn't there before.
Yeah.
And you've got hundreds of businesses now going out raising money based on the premise that they're going to send stuff up, presumably with SpaceX, because there's, you know, Blue
Yeah,
Horizon.
there are actually only three. There are actually only three license holders by the FAA for reusable rockets, and it's SpaceX, Blue Origin, and one called Exos. Yeah, so it's a very, from that perspective, there's an amazing moat around the business because of the SpaceX business. So, the AI stuff could be disrupted by some kids in their bedroom, but the space bit of it is probably quite hard to compete with. So it does create an amazing moat.
Yeah. All right. So look, any questions or thoughts from anyone else? So Francis is asking any idea what the listing price is. I don't.
The last price I saw in the secondary market was 620 a share, which I think is 1.2 or 1.3 billion or something like that. So it's obviously going
Brilliant.
to it's going to be a bit higher than that. There's another interesting dynamic in this, is there's a new Fed chair coming. Um, Powell is stepping down. There's going to be a new chair of the Federal Reserve. It's widely anticipated that the new Fed chair will come in and cut interest rates, which will be very bullish for the stock market. Confirmations are not that predictable in the US. They can take 3 days or 3 months. So when that is a bit more vague. But yeah, it could be around June, July time. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
another factor, I guess, that could come into play.
Yeah. So look, SpaceX isn't one of our listings, unfortunately. But we are looking at probably somewhere between half a dozen and 10 listings over the next 12 months. We have a lot of deal flow. And normally when we do a webinar like this, and we do about one a month, it's pre-IPO webinars now, much smaller companies typically, but with great growth stories and great opportunities. We bring the founders and the executive team on, tell you about it, and give you an opportunity to participate if you're interested in pre-IPO deals. You'll receive our monthly newsletter just because you're on this webinar. But if you want to get kind of access to the deals ahead of time, then we have a Telegram group. Just kind of lets us share with you any interesting opportunities that come along. And yeah, so if you're interested in that, do join there. But we should have probably at least one webinar next month on a pre-IPO, and we've got lots and lots in the pipeline. So lots of cool stuff.
So yeah,
Um,
scan the QR code or click the link in the chat. It won't work if you don't have Telegram on your phone. So you need a Telegram app to actually join Telegram, and then you can join that group. And we're always posting stuff we're up to, deals that are coming through, videos, of interviewing the founders of companies that we're working with. That kind of stuff all gets posted in there. So I think when you join, you can go back through and see some of the stuff that's in there.
deals. Cool. So any last thoughts? I guess the big question is, are you buying, holding, selling when it
Yeah,
goes?
I mean,
What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, my comments on this. I don't think I'm going to go near it. Although I do think it can be squeezed up quite a bit in the early days, just because of the points that we've mentioned, that they have a very tight holding at the beginning, and they've got exit liquidity coming from S&P 500 and Nasdaq 100 holders. But I do believe perfection is priced in, and so I think that does reduce the kind of wriggle room to the upside. So there's a lot of downside potential, but the upside potential is all from that popularity kind of squeeze. And I guess the fear could be that this is a market top signal. When you have something that's priced in this way, is it all over? And everybody's been saying the whole AI data center and all that market is a bubble. I got offered my first distressed data center deal a couple of days ago, which is in Texas, where the financing rug has been pulled on them, and I suspect that's like just a domino in that whole sector because there's been so much debt flying around to fuel those data centers. So it could be a market top signal when it goes. It is going to be insanely big, but as Callum has said, there's going to be an incredible trickle down effect from this. So it's going to create so many millionaires. And when you get when you get money out of the hands of institutions and get it into the hands of people, the economy does incredibly well. So this could actually be really timely for Trump's midterms. And showing that the economy is doing great and people are spending lots of money and everything's going swimmingly. So there are a lot of reasons why people might want this to be really, really successful. So no, it's super interesting to watch. It's unprecedented. There's never been anything like this in our lifetimes, and never been anyone like Elon as well. So that combination is uh, pretty exciting. Will Elon come to my country if we manage to fund him?
I'll
Maybe,
have a
maybe.
word.
It depends where your country is, Michael. So, um, been getting a few distressed data center deals too. Are you planning to roll up? No, actually, we're
We might have a buyer.
yeah. We
Reach out, Jan.
yeah. I mean, actually, there are some people buying in that space. So yeah, we might be able to find buyers for you. But yeah, it's one of those things. You need more capacity, but there's a lot of debt, and that gets very hard to. And also, the energy issue is massive. So I heard in the UK now, if you wanted a new data center, it'll take you 10 years to get connected to the grid. So all the lip service from the government about being the center of innovation is, yeah, possibly a little bit weak when you dig into it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, like I don't like buying stock as retail. Yeah, generally when you're in our line of business, you want deals where you're on the inside rather than on the outside. So that's kind of why I won't be participating. But yeah, if you
There has also been this frenzy. You've been on the receiving end of this as well. There seems to have been a frenzy of people offloading stock in the run-up to an IPO, which is unusual. Normally it's demand driven. This seems to be supply driven. I must have been offered it from 10 different people on a large scale, like $50 million clips. And I'm even getting adverts on YouTube to buy pre-IPO in SpaceX. So it's really
think so,
unusual.
yeah. I think part of that is kind of the explosion of secondaries, and what's happened is when you dig a bit beneath the surface, some of those deals are really, really ugly. You've kind of got the original seller, and then somebody else selling it and taking a margin, and somebody else selling it and taking a margin. By the time it gets down to you, there's not a lot left. But I think the other way of looking at this, and Musk himself has said it, that the argument for AGI and the age of abundance that we're potentially moving into, there's a compelling argument that 1.5 trillion or 1.75 trillion is going to be small numbers in 5 years, 10 years, and that the person that controls the route to space and everything kind of going up that way is going to be able to clip the ticket on an awful lot of stuff. So we may see that this as being ridiculously cheap, as when Google went public at $78 a share or whatever it was, and everyone thought that was overpriced. So
Well, I mean, I must admit, yeah,
$3.6
when they bought YouTube, no one got it.
billion.
When Facebook bought Instagram, no one got it. So yeah, I mean, WhatsApp, no one got it. Why are we paying 18 billion for a messaging app that doesn't generate any revenue? And yeah, now it all kind of makes sense.
Yeah, interesting stuff. All right, let's see. John's saying we've got exciting opportunities in Africa you should consider, especially in the data center space. Yeah, look, there's some pretty compelling reasons to start sticking data centers everywhere, and especially if you've got places like the US and the UK, which are fighting to not have data centers in their backyards, despite the economic upturn of it. Like, I mean, as to your point, Jeremy, I can't remember what it is in the US, but AI is basically the entire GDP growth in the first quarter of this year. It's staggering.
Mm.
Um, Kat is saying, I know the system operators are trying to fill the generation gap, but the issue for them is just getting over their skis.
Yeah, I mean, actually,
Yeah.
there's the gas turbine generators, which are basically jet engines in a container. So you take like a jet engine from a plane, pretty much, and you stick it in a container, and you put a generator on the end of it because you get 32,000 horsepower in something the size of a container. The price of those have quadrupled in the last year because everyone is buying them for data center energy. They also breach all the EPA rules, so horrible for the environment, like horrible emissions problems. So in America, they stick them on wheels, so they can argue they're temporary and portable. Even though if you look at the data centers, you'll have lines of these things where because they can't get enough power from the grid. And even brand new ones from GE now, there's 3-year waiting list to get one of these jet turbine generators. So that whole market has just gone nuts for people to generate power because there's not enough grid power to run these data, especially the hyperscalers. They just can't. There's not enough
Yeah,
electricity to run
so
them.
I was hearing from someone who's on the board of a couple of factories in the US, and just saying that there is no awareness yet in Middle America that this desire for energy is actually going to suck away from like normal corporate America.
Hmm.
So all of these companies that just have taken electricity for granted for years are suddenly going to find themselves in a fight with AI companies who have far bigger budget. Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
it's going to be really interesting. And that, yeah, China is definitely way ahead in their energy production opportunities. So interesting space.
Yeah. Yeah, and that from an investor standpoint as well, the old idea of selling the shovels instead of mining for the gold, it is going to be things like Rolls-Royce who make the small modular reactors, these kind of stocks that sit around the fringes, the energy companies that are providing this stuff, they're going to be really interesting. So we just announced an energy deal, but it's basically an energy management company called Enercon. So Enercon did a management buyout 30 years ago, and obviously now it's super interesting because they do data center energy management systems. But Enercon in the US, because we got the Asian bit, which is based in Singapore and covers the rest of the world. But the US bit just got bought by Generate, who do power solutions for hyperscale data centers. So Enercon in the US is owned by Generate, and CMG Cleantech, which is a public company that we set up, owns Enercon for the rest of the world. And it's a really interesting really interesting space because it's almost like they do the plans for these data centers, then they think about the energy. And of course, when they're doing the plans, they'd like to, they're going to put a windmill on the roof and it's going to be great for the environment. And then, it doesn't quite work in reality. It's also because there is recently a few scams impersonating Elon. Yeah, do you know what? I was actually thinking this with so many being offered. I mean, also, I mean, even so, I got offered shares by a very reputable Swiss bank. But when you looked at the structure, it was an SPV that owned another SPV that owned an AMC that had some shares in it that were from someone else. I mean, the actual chain of custody was incredibly obfuscated, and it was $50 million worth of shares, but could easily have been completely fake because all the pretty much the only evidence was that the guys at this fund had checked it, and their evidence was the guys at that fund had checked it, and their evidence was the guys at the AMC had checked it. And you just kind of think this sounds all a bit 2009 to me. It's like a subprime situation. Oh, it's okay. Somebody else checked it. I'm sure it'll be fine. So yeah, no, I think there's a
Sure.
lot of scammy stuff going on.
There is. Watch yourselves. Cool. Well, look, great conversation, and yeah, I am definitely going to be getting my popcorn and watching this when this launches. I think it's going to be fascinating.
Yeah.
So haven't got the final date yet, but probably sometime in June, I think, is what's been said. But we shall see. Yeah, have fun. And if you want to get access to more deals, smaller deals, deals we can get in pre-IPO, then join the Telegram group. And yeah, we'll see you soon. We'll see you on LinkedIn. Cheers, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks for going.
Bye, everyone.